This Shabbat, we read Parshat KiTeze. It opens like this. KiTeze le'milchama olevecha. When you go out to war on your enemy, we're talking about going out to war on your enemy, what you do in the battlefield. How do you conduct yourself in the battlefield? We're talking about a real war against real enemies. Now, usually the commentary on these verses, they talk about going out to war on your Yetzer Hara, that this verse is talking about when you go out to war, you have a Yetzer Hara that's always conflicted with you, and you got to conquer that Yetzer Hara. Now, that's a nice word, that's the drasha, but it's not the pshat. Now, it's understandable that in the exile, 2,000 years, that we didn't have a national enemy, we didn't have a national entity, we really didn't have a way to apply this verse that you would see, you could understand why we would say the enemy spoken here is your Yetzer Hara. But now, with back in the land of Israel, we got no shortage of enemies, so we can go back to the pshat. Okay? When you go to war on your enemy, let's see what you got to do. Now the Torah continues here. What happens? You have these captures. You capture people. The shivita shivyo. You've captured these people, and you saw amongst the captured people a beautiful woman. She's a captured woman, and she's beautiful, and you lust for her, and you want to take her for a wife. And then it explains what you got to do if you want to marry her. You have to go through all these conditions, and she has to go through all these conditions if you really want to marry her, and that's what the beginning of the parsha is all about. So Rashi says like this, that it says KiTeze le'milchama. We're talking about here a melchemet reshut. The war we're talking about here is a non-obligatory war. It's a voluntary war. That is, what's a voluntary war? Let's say Israel tomorrow wants to conquer Canada. They want to expand their kingdom beyond their borders. That would be a voluntary war, a melchemet reshut. It's not a war of survival. Now, that's what we're talking about in this verse. We're not talking about a melchemet mitzvah, Rashi says, because in melchemet mitzvah, which he calls a melchemet Eretz Yisrael, in an obligatory war, which is over the land of Israel, you don't have any captured people. You don't capture anybody. And Rashi explains, no. On that it says, lo techiyeh kol neshama. If it's an obligatory war, a melchemet mitzvah, you got to wipe everybody out. And because we're talking about captives here, we can only be talking about a melchemet reshut, not a melchemet mitzvah. So our war with the Arabs, there's no such thing as a captive. Or this halacha of a beautiful captive woman can't be applicable to the Arab situation today because number one, it's a melchemet mitzvah, and there are no captives. It's a battle over the land of Israel, which is a melchemet mitzvah. And secondly, there's really no such thing as a beautiful Arab that I've seen. Okay, the other mitzvah that I wanted to mention here, this is really interesting, that Rabbi Kahana gave a chidush here. It says in a couple of verses afterwards, is ki tivneh bayit chadash. If you build a new house, vasita ma'akel legagecha, and you shall build, you have to put a railing on your roof or a banister on your roof. Velo tasim damim bebeitecha, so nobody gets hurt. You don't want people dying and falling off the roof. So there's a mitzvah to have a ma'akeh, a railing or a banister, and that's what the mitzvah is all about. You have to be safe. Shelo yeh damim bebeitecha, so you don't have blood in your house. One day, Rabbi Kahana came into the shiva, and he said, "You know what? This mitzvah of the ma'akeh, of the banister, of the railing, this is the mitzvah for today. Why? Because the mitzvah is to have a safe house. Shelo yeh damim bebeitecha." You can't have a situation where there are hostile Gentiles throwing rocks at you and Molotov cocktails and doing all kinds of damage, and you don't know when you're going to get stabbed in the back walking around the streets. That's the railing. Your house has to be safe. That's the ma'akeh. If you're going to have a war, you have a war. KiTeze le'milchama olevecha. You go out to war. That's understandable. You go out to war. But inside your house, you're not supposed to have problems in your house. That's the ma'akeh. That's the mitzvah for today. You have to have a safe house. And so we just brought something that's not the pshat. So sometimes you don't have to bring pshat, like the ma'akeh, but it's okay to do it once in a while. Have a great Shabbos.